Hello everybody and welcome into another mini episode of OGP. I'm Michael. In 2 weeks we'll be back with a regular format episode. Jordan and I are going to talk about game preservation and the death of physical media in lieu of those Xbox leaks. But we need a little bit more time to get that all together, so for now we're doing one of these. Let's start with what I've been playing. There's two things basically. The first is F-Zero 99. I'm playing that still. It passed the 2-week test. I think a lot of people were wondering if this game was going to have any sort of staying power, and it definitely has. It's still very popular with streamers. I'm still having a blast with it. They added some new courses actually just this past weekend, I believe, which is doing a great job of keeping my interest, and it's just a ton of fun. It's getting really sweaty though. Like these lobbies are getting incredibly sweaty, but I don't know, I think that's really exciting that the game's still got a hold on me. And then the other thing is Pikmin 1. I picked up the physical release of Pikmin 1+2, and I played through Pikmin 1. Still a great game, that's not surprising, though. I do wish that the game got a bit more of a visual overhaul. Some of the textures look really rough on my 4K TV, so, I'm all about a Pikmin 1 HD somewhere down the road. Okay, so for the main thing I want to talk about today, this was sort of a idea I had for a side segment on the preservation episode, but I decided that, might as well just take that out and talk about it here, because it's more or less going to be a one-sided rant anyway, so I might as well use this format to talk about it. And that's this Mortal Kombat 1 Switch port. Not necessarily the port itself, but some of the reaction to it that I've seen that's just gotten under my skin. We all know that I'm a huge Nintendo shill, but sometimes other shills just get on my nerves. So for those of you who don't know, Mortal Kombat 1 on Switch launched in a pretty dire state. Well, we got frame rates as low as 10 FPS, broken animations. There's that kind of famous example of the reptile character's jaw not moving. They removed some animations, so there's actually like background elements just will not animate. They're totally static. It looks very awkward. And speaking of awkward, just the graphical presentation can be really uncanny at times. If you've been online and you've seen anything about this game, this port, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And rightfully the game was panned. This is just totally unacceptable for a game to release in this state. And listen, okay, I'm all for the idea that graphics aren't everything. A lot of my favorite games are retro games. Those are not, the most graphically impressive. Mario 64, graphically, it's probably not great, and I'm probably just used to it, which is why I'm fine with it. But, objectively not great, but there has to be some sort of underpinning technical competence there, and that's just not being displayed in this port. I just think this is totally unacceptable. You look at some other games in the Switch library. Super Smash Brothers, right? That's a fighting game with, honestly, a lot more going on than this one. And that runs 1080p, 60 FPS. You got Mario Odyssey, beautiful game, 60 FPS. I just do not believe a fighting game like this is as mechanically deep as either of those, and yet they run better. I just do not understand this. And it's not just nitpickers, right? Because the head of NetherRealms has pledged to fix the Switch version, so they've acknowledged that this port has issues. So why does this got me so mad exactly? Well, part of it is that the game is $70, assuming you don't go for the deluxe version, which is over $100. I think it's like $110. And yet people are still trying to justify this. People are still defending this port, and I just think it's ridiculous. I want to read a few comments here. This is one I saw on Nintendo Live's review. Not a fan of listing negatives that can be / that will be patched in the future. MK11 patched lots of times. MK1 will definitely also be. I hope you'll return to this review and fix the score once it is. My only guess is that this person purchased Mortal Kombat 1 and they do not want to feel any sort of buyer's remorse. So they're imagining that the product that they have is actually a competent one, because this is just, how can a reviewer possibly do this? How can they review the imaginary idea of what a game eventually might be? It's just absurd. And I know that, a lot of this probably stems from those comments from Ed Boon where he said that they're going to fix it. But again, that's all remains to be seen, right? Who knows what the fixes will look like. Digital Foundry recently put out a really great video where they cover various games that have been quote-unquote fixed on Switch. And while some of it is impressive, I thought that the No Man's Sky fixes were pretty interesting. First of all, it didn't launch in that form, so at the time no one could have reviewed it in its later patched form. And secondly, for the majority of games, they still don't run as well as you would want them to be an ideal experience. So this just does not ring true to me, and I think it's another example of people just misunderstanding the job of reviewers. Here's one I saw on Eurogamer, and I think this was actually under the Digital Foundry video there. Quote, "It's all about gameplay anyway. Visuals and all this 8K 250 FPS can't fix that." Again, I'll say I don't think the graphics are everything, but I just don't understand it when it comes to affecting the gameplay. A game that runs at 10 FPS at times, especially like a fighting game with an unstable frame rate, it doesn't work. There's a reason why Smash Brothers has to be at 60 FPS. Once the frame rate becomes variable, it creates this disconnect where, you press a button and you don't know exactly when the move is going to come out, or it's harder to interpret your opponent's movements. And these highly competitive games, it just doesn't make any sense. And this also relates to another thing I was talking about on the last episode about the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake, which, again, I'm excited for that. It looks fun. But the cut to 30 FPS is actually an issue. It isn't just for people who really care about the biggest number. It affects the gameplay. The example I used there was Super Guardian, which is a frame-specific trick. Changing the number of frames there are is going to change how difficult that is to execute. Anyone who's spent any amount of time learning combos or trying to get good at a fighting game, even Smash Brothers, knows how important it is to have a solid frame rate. So again, I don't get this, and I don't think anyone's asking for 8K 250 frames per second, just the bare minimum, honestly. Here's another one I saw under that same post. "It could probably look better on Switch, but then it'd need a proper port like The Witcher 3, and there probably was no time for that. Because why polish a game before launch if you can patch it forevermore?" So yeah, I think this is the thought process behind the devs potentially, but it's not a justification at all. We don't want this mindset. If you don't have the time to do it right, honestly, don't do it at all. And I guess what would be my suggestion for handling this situation? Because I saw other people comment something like, if it didn't come out on Switch like this, we wouldn't get it at all. On the one hand, I think that it would be better to get no version than a scam, essentially, a $70 scam that's just taking advantage of people. But I think that we need to go back to doing custom versions of games. So if you were, around during the Wii PS2 era, you might remember games like The Force Unleashed, the Star Wars game, that came out on Xbox 360 and PS3 as well, I believe. And that was the main version of the game, but the Wii and PS2 also got versions that were extremely competent, but they were totally unique. You would not confuse one for the other. They're their own unique versions of games. It's sort of like what they did with portable versions of games back in the day too, where they would sort of reinterpret the gameplay to work on less powerful hardware. I think we might need to start seeing that, especially if the Switch is to stick around for the foreseeable future. I think a lot of us at this point, we're just banking on a Switch 2. But who knows? Maybe it won't happen. And in which case, if we want to see some of these next-gen games on Switch, they need to start building them around the Switch hardware, special versions of it. That's my opinion anyway. All right, so I'm going to get off my soapbox now. And that's it for me. Thanks for listening to this rant, and we'll be back, like I said, next time with a special episode on game preservation and physical media. I look forward to seeing you then. Have a good one. Goodbye.